Can you turn my Council members Mahan and Kolstad, if you could please mute your side of the phone for us.
Okay.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the study session this evening. So I'm calling the study session meeting to order. Roll call, City Clerk.
Council member Mahan,
Here.
O'Neill,
Present.
Councilmember Davis, Watanabe, Kolstad,
Here.
and Mayor Gilmore.
Here. As you can see, we have two council members that are remotely joining us. And so for me, this is a first here in this council chamber. So thank you both for remotely joining us. So City Clerk.
I just would like to make the AB 23 announcement that members of the Santa Clara Stadium Authority, Sports and Open Space Authority, and Housing Authority are entitled to receive $30 for each attended meeting and the Statement of Behavioral Standards. The City of Santa Clara has adopted a code of ethics and values and behavioral standards for public meetings to promote and maintain the highest levels of conduct. This includes mutual respect, robust discussion, and allowing city business to be done in an efficient and consistent manner. Please note that as the presiding officer, the mayor's direction in matters of process and decorum should be followed, and that use of the gavel indicates all conversations must conclude and everyone in attendance should come to order and attention. Welcome, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much. So the first item we have for our study session is the main item, the main attraction, which is the presentation of the final community engagement report for issues related to Levi Stadium. And this is a council and a stadium authority item. So City Manager, Stadium Authority Director, Santana.
I just want to make a couple of opening comments. If you recall, in the September-October timeframe, the board asked for a robust community engagement program that would be able to inform the board on key information that helped shape future policy. There was a lot of issues that were surfacing, and the council was wise in putting in place a multidisciplinary approach that provided qualitative and quantitative information for later decision-making. So for this evening, we're in study session, and there will be some policy recommendations that are surfaced for you to consider, but there's no action this evening. It's just helping to shape what the data suggests by way of policy. As part of that, though, what we did recognize is the effort and the desire to get valid data to inform policy really was larger than the resources and the expertise available within the organization. And what we did is we brought forward an award-winning group of consultants that are renowned in this field. And I just want to share a little bit of some of their background so that the public is aware of the high-quality consultants that are informing us this evening. We have Lou Edwards, and that Lou Edwards group is led by Catherine Liu. And I just wanted to throw out a new accolade that she has received in addition to many. You may have read about her accolade. She was selected as one of few California Influencers projects, where she is identified in the state of California as someone who has helped shaping the policy framework for the state, as well as a key influencer during election season.
Congratulations.
It's a huge accolade. And with that comes 21 years of owning her business, and she has led several local governments in enacting local funding measures, state and different policy issues, and is obviously very well respected in this field. We have EMC Research, and they are a nationally recognized firm who specializes in providing nonpartisan information for policymakers. And they too have done thousands of community surveys and focus groups for hundreds of clients throughout the nation. And then we have Public Dialogue Consortium, and they are located in the Bay Area. They've been doing work on communications and community engagement since 1995. They've worked with several local governments, residents, stakeholder groups on cutting-edge communication techniques for critical public issues that require resolution. They've also recently, they have conducted about 50 civic engagement projects in the Bay Area, both large-scale, multi-year projects, as well as smaller civic engagement events. And so I think we have probably the best consultants to inform us going forward. The data definitely will help us with future decisions. I do want to say that because the data has been sought after already by either media outlets or different stakeholders, the data that you hear this evening will be published to the city's website after the study session. We wanted to make sure, for fairness, that everybody heard it at once and had access to the information at the same time. So with that, I'll pass it over to Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Santana. Good evening, Authority Board members, members of the city staff, and the public who may be listening. My name is Catherine Liu, and I am the co-founder and senior consultant of the Lou Edwards Group. We appreciate and hold very specifically the confidence of this board in selecting our team. And want to say simply by way of introduction, it is very important to reiterate that our consulting team itself has no views or opinions or agenda, I will say, on any of the topics that we surveyed. The only opinion and view that we had was that we simply wanted to do an unbiased, impartial, and fair representation of the wonderful diversity of viewpoints, joys and frustrations of your community. And that is what we will be reporting on tonight. Before we leave this topic, I will also remind again members of the listening public that no member of our team is a lobbyist, and none of our organizations have represented the 49ers. With that, I'm going to jump into the project goals. Our goals were truly to implement an impartial, unbiased, multidisciplinary engagement process that comprehensively assessed the public views on city and stadium issues. As such, it was important to us that we utilize all multidisciplinary approaches at our disposal, including quantitative methods that provide more of a random, representative sample for statistical analysis. Qualitative methods that allow stakeholders a more comprehensive, personal and facilitated forum to robustly express their views. Engaging local residents, registered voters, stakeholders, and businesses were all part of our study and review. And it was very important to us that we utilize an approach that embraced all types of communications and engagement methods. There was a great question from a member of the public, well, are you only doing phone surveys? Because a lot of people use a lot of different ways of communication. And so we did use web-based online platforms, personal meetings, one-on-one conversations, focus groups. We'll review that all momentarily. And of course, after literally 6 months of work, we are here this evening to provide the highlights of results and recommendations to this board and to the public. And I want to reassure the board and members of the public, as our director indicated, our study will not only be posted online following this session, but there will be a detailed appendix of each type of study conducted that has been prepared in a thoughtful, user-friendly way. Next, I do want to quickly remind members of the board and staff and public who are here tonight of the benefit of utilizing the multidisciplinary approach. As you may recall, public opinion surveys are quantitative in nature. They draw a random representative sample of the audience and allows us to generalize those results. It is a format that lends itself well to statistical and numerical analysis and is a very precise way of reporting data, but not a in-depth, comprehensive way. Facilitated engagements are qualitative. It is a self-selected sample, e.g. people that choose to come to a public meeting and share their perspectives. So it limits our ability to generalize those conversations as it is a self-selected method. But it's a format that enables participants to express their views and experiences in their own words more robustly, rather than choosing amongst some options. So it is more thoughtful and more in-depth, but less precise. So what our team did was we did engage in a multidisciplinary cross-pollination process where a public dialogue consortium known as PTC utilized the results of the first citywide and near-neighbor scientific surveys to inform the design of its engagement meetings and interviews, and assisted in developing their qualitative focus groups. And then EMC research, our quantitative team, used PDC's qualitative research to inform the development of our May policy survey, which is the basis of our team's recommendations this evening. So there's a lot of collaboration, cross-pollination, and we really drew from each other's work to take the data to the next level. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Ruth Bernstein from EMC Research. She is going to talk about the results of the first study to identify initial issues. Ruth?
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. So I'm going to take you through, right, as Catherine said, the beginning quantitative piece. And there were actually more than one quantitative piece at the beginning. So we did a citywide voter survey. We did 600 interviews of voters because we kind of wanted to see sort of what, issues that were pertinent to the community came up. Then we also conducted 2 what we're calling near neighbor surveys. I'm going to talk a little more in depth about what that means. But we did a survey of residents that live near the stadium and then also businesses that are in close proximity to the stadium. So the citywide voter survey, it was a telephone survey. We include landlines and cell phones, so it's not just people who still only have landlines, so landlines and cell phones. It was all registered voters, which is a wide population. This was done in January, so it was done at the very, really kind of first piece to establish kind of where are we with the community. We did 600 interviews, and we did offer the survey in 4 languages, in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese using bilingual callers. We professionally translate the questionnaire. We have professional interviewers who are bilingual and can conduct the survey in other languages. Then the near neighbor surveys, as I said, there were 2 of them. One was residents. So again, it was a live telephone survey. It was with landlines and cell phones, residents within a mile of the stadium. I'm going to show you a map in a minute. We did that a little bit later. We did it in February. It took a while because it's hard to get. It's a small geography. And we wound up completing 174 interviews. And again, we offered the survey in multiple languages. Then the businesses, we pulled again a list of businesses within the area that surrounds around a mile of the stadium. We conducted that survey in February, and we called a random list of businesses. We got a really nice distribution. We were able to get 82 interviews in the end, but a very nice distribution of types of businesses and of people at different levels kind of within that business. We were able to actually talk to a lot of the business owners and senior level people within the business. So we feel like that was actually a really nice way to include their opinions. And as you can see here is just a map of what we're talking about when we say near neighbor. So we essentially drew a 1 mile radius around the stadium, and then we also included the area of North San Jose and in Sunnyvale that are sort of close to the stadium and are working with the city identified that those areas are sort of impacted really in some ways by the stadium. So what we found, now I'll take you through some of the numbers. And this is kind of a high-level summary here of that. So what we saw is first that the city of Santa Clara is really well-liked by the community. So we asked, how is the job the city government is doing overall, the job the city is doing keeping citizens informed, the job the city does responding to concerns and complaints. And you can see here a lot of blue, the positive. So the blue is the total of the excellent or good, and the negative, the red, only fair or poor. All of the ratings here are positive. And then the top bar on each is the near neighbors, and under is the voters or the citywide. So we see similar responses. The community overall, at least 64% of voters saying the city's doing a good job. 60% say the city's doing a good job keeping them informed, and half say that doing a good job responding to citizen concerns. And one thing to note on the far right there, the percentage that rate as poor compared to excellent, we do see that the excellent rating is higher than poor, and that the poor rating is fairly low. So even when we're seeing the total negative, most of that is only fair, not a poor rating.
Board members, as someone that has reviewed literally hundreds of these types of surveys and scores of these types of surveys very recently, just in the past few weeks, I can tell you from my professional experience, these are very strong numbers. Kudos to the team and to the staff for having these favorable ratings. I've seen numbers that are literally, in the last week or two, 30 or 40 points below where you are. So good work.
Yes, and I can back that up as well. And we have a problem on the slide. And apologies, I will read you the numbers because it appears that we have a problem on this slide. So on the, this is the overall rating of quality of life in Santa Clara. And what's amazing here is really how happy people are, that your community really loves living here. So excellent, the overall citywide, excellent 39% rate. The quality of life is excellent, 49% good, and then near neighbor, 43% excellent, 47% good. So really, really very strong ratings, 11% negative rating amongst the voters citywide and 10% negative on the neighbors. And then we asked an open-ended question, what do you like most about living in Santa Clara? Let's see what they love. And, the location, 21% mention a great location. It's a small town feel, 14%. The community's friendly, the security, the low crime rate, the climate. It's a clean and beautiful city, the, amenities. It's not like, oh yeah, I just kind of like it, it's a nice place, but they're able to really articulate why it is they like to live here, and a lot of really positive things. So then we also asked, okay, well, what do you like least about living here? And we do see that traffic, and maybe that's no surprise to any of you that live here. And this is really obviously an issue that we see all over the Bay Area, so it is not unique to Santa Clara, but we do see that traffic citywide, 26% mentioning traffic as what they like least. Among the neighbors who live close to the stadium, 33%, so it comes up as the top response. And then housing costs right behind that for both groups. And then growth, overpopulation, the city government really only mentioned by a small percentage, lack of restaurants, crime. And then to note, because we wanted to highlight here the stadium, 2% of voters citywide mentioned the stadium as their top concern, and 9% of those who live near the stadium, 9% mentioned that as the thing they like least. But again, among those neighbors who live near the stadium, other mentions were mostly higher. And then we asked about some issues about the stadium. So we gave them a list and said, are you concerned about this issue related to the stadium? And what we see here is, again, traffic comes up to the top. So voters citywide, 35% are very concerned about the traffic related to the stadium, another 34% somewhat concerned, 69% total concern, and then the neighbors who live closer by, 78%. Remember, they were concerned about traffic in general, so traffic near the stadium is not a big surprise. And then right behind that is parking, sort of related to traffic. Parking in the neighborhoods close to the stadium. Now you see among voters citywide a real drop in intensity, but still we have half saying that that's at least somewhat of a concern. And those who live closer to the stadium, 62% saying that's a concern, 33% very concerned. So obviously we're seeing an issue there. Littering also comes up as number 3, 47% voters citywide concerned, 46% of neighbors. Public drinking and drug use, the number of weekend events, loitering, noise from flyovers and helicopters, noise from events at night, how late the weekday events go, how late weekend events go, the number of weekend events. We all see for all of these, there is a population, now it is not a majority, but there is a constituency that are very concerned about these issues, or at least somewhat concerned. And then again, artificial light from the stadium, noise from events during the day, very small, and then fireworks, again, kind of the smallest in the level of concern.
Yes, Ruth, before you move on, it is important to emphasize that these choice options were randomly rotated. So they were not asked in the same order for every interviewee. So we've ranked them on the slide, but they're randomized to prevent any type of bias. You will see as we make our way through the presentation a remarkable consistency throughout our reports of the top issues of concern. And I would call the board's attention to the 40-point differential between, as an example, traffic at 69% and the timing of weekend events, as an example. So that is a very significant difference.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for reminding about the randomized. These were definitely randomized. I did want to just highlight, because we know it has been a concern, it has been brought up a number of times, the noise. So just highlighting here, noise from events at night, 31% of voters citywide say it's a concern, 10% very concerned, and then near neighbors, 36% concerned, 13% very concerned. So again, it is much, much lower than traffic or parking, a huge difference. We are not going to say there is no one that's concerned. There is certainly a number of people who are concerned about this issue, but it is not a citywide concern about the noise. And then also the number of weekday events, also much lower concern citywide, 34% concerned, only 10% very concerned. Among the close neighbors, a little higher at 43%, somewhat concerned, 17% very concerned, but again, much lower than their bigger concern, which is the traffic and parking. Moving on to just on those questions about when we ask businesses, so how concerned, here's some issues that might impact your business. Are you concerned, are these serious or not serious problems? And you can see traffic, again, comes to the top, 29% traffic saying it's a serious concern, 26% somewhat concerned for a total of 55%, and parking 35%. And then sidewalks, littering, noise, public drinking and drug use, illegal dumping, all of these have some concern, but really their big issue is with traffic and parking. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sean to talk about the stakeholder and community meetings.
Great. Thank you very much, Ruth. So we did the qualitative engagement, and I want to let the board know that one of your appendices is our report. So we have a report that has a lot more detail than what you're going to see in the slides here. And Catherine had mentioned the difference between qualitative and quantitative research. And you'll see, hopefully our slides will come up here in just a moment. You will see when they do that our slides have a lot of words on them and just a few numbers and hardly any graphs or anything. So it's another way of demonstrating the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. We conducted several different kinds of engagement events. We did community interviews at 2 community events. We were at Levi Stadium on March 22nd for the Mexican national soccer game against Iceland. And the following morning, we were at the farmers market on Jackson and Benton, and we engaged people literally on the street interviews at the farmers market and as people were tailgating before the Levi Stadium soccer game. And we would go up with our clipboards and we would ask them questions. We had formulated early in the project very open-ended questions. We actually started with, as you think about Levi Stadium, what words come to mind? So we did not want to bias at all, very broad, and then depending on the answers, we would follow up. It sounds like you have some concerns, tell me more about. It sounds like you have some appreciations for the stadium, tell me more about that. And so we engaged that process in the community interviews. We also did the same process, asking the same questions early in the project with the focus groups. And we had 6 focus groups. We had some that were open to the public, some that were designated for specific audiences. We met with Great America. We had a focus group with staff from there. We had a great focus group. They were all good focus groups with Chamber of Commerce. And we reached out to several other groups. And I know when I reported to you in February our plan, we had lots of groups that we reached out to, community groups, soccer groups, etc., schools. We did not get a lot of interest, and so I would follow up with multiple emails. So, and you'll see the numbers here. We had 41 people in 6 focus groups, a good number, but not a really big, robust number. And then we had 3 community meetings, and these community meetings were at the end of the process where we Also, we're asking at this point for recommendations, not just open-ended questions, but give us some recommendations. Here's what we had heard in the earlier stages. And that was really the focus of the community meetings. So we did have 3 community meetings, 23 participants total, so they really turned out to be additional focus groups. Again, great conversation, good quality of interaction. The numbers were a little surprising to us. We thought they'd be a little bit higher. We took those same questions that we had asked in the community interviews, focus groups, community meetings, and we asked those questions online. So we had an online survey, all open-ended questions. So you'll see we had over 400 participants give us a feedback in our various engagement methods. So who were the participants? I should also say, Appendix A in our report has a more detailed description of each one of those engagement events. Appendix B also has a more detail about our demographics. Here, I broke it down simply by geography. So again, over 400 people participated. This is not generalizable. These were self-selected people. They agreed to talk to us in a community meeting. They agreed to give us 2 hours of their evening for a focus group or a community meeting. So a self-selected sample, and the breakdown was near stadium participants within the 95054 zip code, 143 participants, 32%. Other zip codes, other Santa Clara participants outside of the 95054 zip code, 182, 41%. And we did talk to quite a few non-Santa Clara participants, 117, and that was 27%. Just to break down, and again, this is not in any way quantitative, but one of the ways of sort of a crude way of classifying the participants, were their views mixed? They had some supporting comments and then some concerns. Were there all concerns or all support? And so we had a variety, and I'm going to go back just one slide. In the community interviews at the 2 events, lots of mixed views, and some who had just had concerns and support. Jumping down to the online questionnaire, lots of mixed views. We had lots of people with concerns, lots of people with support, some with support and concerns. We look at those focus groups and 3 community meetings, almost 99% of the participants in those venues were all about concerns. I remember numerous times asking, what do you like about the stadium? You must like something about the stadium, and very few positive comments. So it tells you in terms of the self-selection process, those who self-selected to give up 2 hours of their time had lots to say. That's where the intensity and the passion was, and it was almost solely all around concerns. Now again, that's not generalizable to your larger population. Ruth and her research has those numbers. So we're not claiming this is generalizable, but what we're able to do is go in depth with those participants to hear what's behind those concerns, what's driving those concerns. So just a couple observations before I get into our findings. The energy and passion and intensity is with those who have concerns. It was clear and obvious. And just as an interesting sort of anecdote, as we would talk to people and tell us about Levi Stadium, oh, I love Levi Stadium, I think it's great. What do you like about it? I think it's great because there's local entertainment here, economic benefits to the community. Tell us a little bit more about that. Oh, well, that's economic benefits to the community, entertainment. There wasn't a lot below that. We would ask, what do you think about the stadium? Well, I have some concerns. Well, tell me more about that. A half hour later, we were still working through the concerns. So again, people who had concerns had lots to say. It was where all the intensity and passion was. The near neighbors, those who live close to the stadium, and this is no surprise and also confirms what we heard from Ruth, who participated, expressed more concerns, and were more and others were more likely to voice appreciations. But again, not uniform, because we heard a lot of concerns outside of the near neighbors, but within that near neighbor that we talked to, there was a lot of concerns. Here was a very heartening finding from our perspective. Participants who don't live near the stadium express support for those who do. And so I'm gonna come back to that in a minute when I talk a little bit about our findings. At Levi Stadium before the soccer game, a lot of non-Santa Clara residents, people driving in from LA, Fresno. What do you say to people who have concerns about the stadium? Well, they should move. well, that's kind of cold. And I would say, well, tell me why you think so. And because the stadium is great and they love it. We would ask Santa Clara residents who didn't live near the stadium, what do you say to people who live near the stadium? You support it. What about those who live near the stadium who don't? They should be taken care of. We are concerned about that. We recognize that they are having to bear the negative impacts. That was a very heartening finding, and from our perspective, what that does is I think it opens a door for a path forward. So let's get into our results, and again, really wonderful working with Catherine and Ruth and their teams, and just the intersection of our findings really did confirm each other. At the top of our list, and we want to lead with that one, and I'll have a little bit more to say, is trust, transparency, and communication. Parking and traffic, another big one. Safety, security, and noise. All of those first three themes were all coming out of people who had concerns. Those who had support for the stadium, that's our fourth finding there, economic and entertainment benefits. I should also add on the economic and entertainment benefits, one other appreciation was visibility, brings attention, recognition to Santa Clara was another positive, not nearly as strong as the economic and entertainment benefits. So looking a little bit more closely at trust and transparency, many participants, especially those who had concerns, say that there's a lack of trust that's developed between the community and Manco, and to a lesser extent, the city. We asked about that. Why? Mostly due to the perceived lack of financial transparency and then the follow through on initial agreements when the stadium was being considered. We heard promises made, promises not kept. We think this is a really important finding because as people start thinking about traffic and parking and the other concerns they have, it gets filtered through this lens of not having a good, open, honest, trustful relationship from their perspective, especially with the stadium management company. Parking and traffic, as we heard from Ruth on the issue identification, major issue. And it's a major concern for everyone, but especially on the parking side for the near neighbors. Very prominent. And traffic impacts were identified by everybody. And we would hear stories about feeling trapped in their house during events because of traffic and getting out, or feeling excluded from getting to their house because they're not there, there's an event and it's gonna take them a long time to get to their house. People parking, blocking their driveway, parking in a way that they can't even get into their driveway. So lots of stories that really heightened the concern. The other issue, again, very consistent with what we've heard in the public opinion poll, is safety, security, and noise. So many participants cited security concerns, littering, vandalism, loud and raucous behavior, and public urination. Public urination comes up a lot as a really major concern, and I think it's symbolic of a lot of the safety issues that you hear. Stories of bottles, beer bottles in their front yard, people urinating in their bushes. I've never actually used those words in a council meeting, so this is my very first time talking about that, and I've never had that happen before. Near neighbors especially voiced concerns about noise generated by the stadium events, but just as important, maybe even more of a concern, was the noise after the events. And so the event would end, and then people would spill out of the stadium, and it was noise, and the kind of noise that I think, from the perspective of the participants, was a safety issue. It's loud behavior. They're kind of, am I okay? Are they going to do something here? So in some ways, the noise from the events was just as concerning as the noise after the events. Interestingly, the curfew hardly ever came up in our focus groups, interviews, community meetings. There were several instances where I had to actually ask about the curfew because it wasn't generated spontaneously. And then the last finding was from those who have expressed support from the stadium, and it was about economic and entertainment benefits. Almost all those who expressed support for the stadium said they appreciated the economic and entertainment benefits from the city. A concern among these participants is that the stadium's not being utilized to its fullest extent, not maximizing the potential benefits and range of benefits available. So from their perspective, the cities has this wonderful asset. Let's utilize, let's maximize that asset. And here I come back to that heartening finding about those who support the stadium having concern for those who have the negative impacts. We recognize, I'm paraphrasing them, we recognize that when we say we should maximize the stadium, have more events at the stadium, extend the curfew, we recognize that that has negative impacts on the near neighbors, and we want them to be accounted for. It wasn't like, the heck with them, we don't care. It was, yes, we should do that, and yes, we should also attend to the near neighbors and make them whole and mitigate, minimize those negative impacts as much as possible. And so as Catherine moves us forward here on the recommendations, you'll see that there's a broad sort of strategic policy recommendation that tries to capture that tension between those who want more events and those who are negatively affected by those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Ruth Bernstein will discuss the scientific focus groups and the solutions survey. And as she gets started, I want to draw a distinction between the focus groups that the EMC research team did and Dr. Spano's focus groups. The focus groups that Ruth organized were not self-selected. So people were recruited and did not know what topic they were going to be queried about during the course of their discussion. Ruth, let's talk more about that.
Thank you. Right, as Catherine said, so there's a number of different avenues for collecting information, and we felt like, as Sean said, his focus groups were somewhat self-selected, and he got people who had issues and wanted to voice their issues. So what we did is a random selection of people in the community and recruit them to try to come to a focus group. So it's similar to doing a survey. In fact, it starts like doing a survey, and then we say, oh, and can you come and spend Tuesday night with us? And they're given an incentive to come, so we actually pay them a little money to come and spend 2 hours talking with us. So they don't necessarily come with an agenda and we purposely recruited and asked them some questions to make sure that they have kind of varied opinions so that they couldn't try to get into our group. We did divide the groups in 4 different ways. So we had 4 different groups, and they were slightly different populations. So the first, we did find in the quantitative survey that those who were longer-term residents of Santa Clara seemed to have some somewhat different opinions than those that were newer residents. So for those who were not near neighbors to the stadium, we did 2 groups, Santa Clara residents, they don't live near the stadium, and we divided by those who've lived in the city for 15 years or longer and those who live 15 years or less, so that we could divide by those. And then we did a 3rd group that were those who live in Santa Clara in the city and live less than a mile or less from the stadium. And then the 4th group were those that live close to the stadium but live in Sunnyvale or San Jose. So we got a really diverse group of opinions. And what we saw overall actually mirrors a lot of what was done in the other community engagement process and also in the quantitative study. And one of the things we like, sometimes it might seem like, well, you're telling us the same thing again. We in research like when we do multiple forms of research and we hear the same thing over and over again. It validates the research, essentially. So what we're seeing here is that really people have a very positive opinion of the city. What do you like about living here? And they all said great things, and it's a great community. They kind of have a pretty positive view of city government, the job you're doing. We heard things about the small town feel, the location, the weather, the diversity. It's a great city. Some of the things that were concerned were traffic, which again, we figured that, but traffic. The development of housing faster than services, cost of living, definitely cost of housing, and then lack of a downtown area. So those were kind of the big concerns that came up in the groups. Overall attitudes, we saw definitely that newer Santa Clara residents and those in Sunnyvale and North San Jose did have positive views of the stadium. you know, they liked it. They didn't think it had a real big impact on them day to day, and they liked having it in the community. The near neighbors and the longtime residents were a little bit more critical. So they either had more direct impact, or they just it was more of a change in their, you know, what they had in their community for a long time. But they did definitely see positive. So they saw it as an attraction. It's bringing new business. It's bringing people to the city. It's generating, you know, new businesses, the creation of new businesses, and they like that. They are, you know, those that were concerned kind of acknowledge that the stadium events, you know, it may not be for them, but they aren't really happening that often. So yeah, they do bring traffic and parking problems, but they're not really happening that often. Many of them don't feel like they necessarily connect to the events, but it also doesn't really have a huge negative impact on their life day to day. As we saw from the engagement sessions, what we saw, parking was really the central issue, parking caused by the stadium. So, and that leads to other issues, as you already heard, that parking also leads to litter, noise, disturbances. So if someone is walking from the stadium to their car, there is it's not just that person, they bring along noise and other things along with them. Traffic and traffic jams are viewed as a problem. They don't see the stadium as the primary reason for the traffic, that traffic just exists even when there's an event or not. And most seem to know about the curfew, but they really didn't know very much about it. It really wasn't brought up. We talked about it once we brought it up as an issue, but it was not something that seemed to be an overall concern. And then noise itself was really not seen as a big concern, especially compared to parking. So, and they didn't really, there was opposition to eliminating it outright, but they were certainly open to, and especially among the Santa Clara near neighbors, but there was definitely openness to saying, you know, it's something we may be able to alter. Which brings up our next piece of research. Since we did all of this sort of fact-finding and opinion-finding, we then conducted another survey to ask about really some potential solutions and ask more directly about issues. So this was, again, a survey of voters. It was conducted in May. We did 400 interviews this time. Again, we did the multilingual, so English, Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese, and landlines and cell phones. So what we saw, we asked a couple of warm-up questions. What do you think is the biggest positive about having Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara? Boosts the economy. 39% said that. Boosts the economy. 20% draws people or attention to the city. 19% it has, you know, its events we can go to, and they're right nearby. The negatives, traffic. So traffic congestion and parking, almost half mentioned that as the biggest negative about having the stadium in the community. Noise comes up as 14%, crime and security after that. So then we did ask how much, if anything, have you heard or seen about Levi's Stadium recently? Have you seen a lot, some not too much, or nothing at all? 57% said they have heard something about the stadium recently. 22% have heard a lot. 42% said they really haven't heard any, not much or anything. So there is awareness or communication, even though it's right here in your community. 40% really haven't heard anything about it, but over half had. And then we asked how high a priority should it be? Do you think working on issues related to stadium events should be for the mayor and city council? 54% say it should be a priority. 22% say it shouldn't be a priority or it should be a low priority, and 24% don't know. So we do have 17% that rate on a 1 to 7 scale. 17% rate it as a very high, a 7 on that scale. So they're very concerned about issues related to the stadium. Another 37% somewhat concerned, and then about half saying, yeah, either I don't know or I'm not really that concerned. So the intensity is really around those that are concerned, which is why it's not surprising to us when you did community groups or focus groups where self-selected, the people who show up are the people with the biggest concerns. We then said, I'm going to read you a list of issues that may arise during events at Levi's Stadium. After each one, please rate how important addressing that is to you using a scale of 1 to 7. When 1 is not at all important and 7 is very important. And again, these were randomized. And we have, so you can see the responses here. Traffic comes up, there was a big theme here. Traffic comes up first, 41% extremely important, 37% somewhat important, 78% total. Parking in the neighborhoods close to the stadium, 40%, rate that as a 7. Disruptive behavior in neighborhoods around the stadium on event days, 37%. So those three are really the top, all get 70% total importance, and almost, and 37% or more extremely important. And then we see a drop off. So noise is a concern. 27% rate that as a 7, extremely important, 62% total, but you can see the intensity is lower. But it does come up as one of the concerns we asked about. These were the 4 we asked about. We asked some of the questions again that we had asked in the other survey, or that just attitudinal questions about the stadium. The city does a good job communicating with residents about stadium-related issues. 54% agree. The city does a good job responding to citizen concerns and complaints. 51% agree. The Levi's Stadium management does a good job communicating. 41% agree. Levi's Stadium management does a good job responding. 41% agree. And you'll note that although it's lower, that it's the don't know that's higher about the stadium management. And the disagree is, the intensity on the disagree is very low on all 4 of those questions. We did ask about whether or not the community members have contacted someone about a stadium-related problem or concern. So have you contacted anyone about a problem or concern? 25% said they have contacted someone at least once, with 2% saying they've made a contact 5 or more times. So we do have a quarter of city residents saying that they've tried to contact someone in the city, either the stadium, the city, or the police about a stadium-related concern. But 75% have not, so that's 2/3, which is big. The next 2 pages then, the next 2 slides, are about potential, sorry, trying to get it to go. All right, potential solutions. And these were all randomized. So using a scale from 1 to 7, where you support or oppose, with 7 being strongly support and 1 is strongly oppose. Please rate each of the following. And these were randomized, and here's what came to the top: provide more portable toilets in parking lots to discourage public urination. 60% strongly support, 22% somewhat support, a total of 82%. So that was an issue that came up through our qualitative research that we thought we should ask about here, and you can see that it is something that is strongly supported by the community. Increase neighborhood safety patrols before or after events, 52% strongly support, 80 total. Establish an electronic notification system that gives residents advanced notice of events, 50% strongly, 79% total. Reduce stadium parking prices for people who carpool, very strong support. Establish more frequent shuttle service from parking lots further from the stadium. Designate drop-off and pickup areas for those using rideshare like Lyft or Uber. Again, very strong support for those ideas. And now you'll see some of these on the next page. We see less intensity. So offering incentives for taking public transit to and from events, such as free or reduced fares, that does get 75% total, 49% strongly, so that's very strong. Have a live call-in number during events to respond to concerns or complaints. Lower the price of parking in the parking lots. Increase the fine for violating the curfew and noise threshold. Now we're starting to see decrease in intensity. We only have 34% strongly, but still 61% somewhat. And then city issued $20 parking permits for residents in neighborhoods around the stadium, and a 10 p.m. weekday curfew for nighttime events like concerts at Levi Stadium. Those both get a majority saying support, and I'm going to talk in more detail about both of those issues as we go forward. So the curfew.
But notably, the curfew issue, 50% as compared to 82% on providing more portable toilets. That 30% differential is extremely significant. So just to put it into context for folks.
Right. I think, the thing that we really see here are the safety and quality of life improvements, so the portable toilets, the safety patrols, the notification, the communication, the parking. This is where we're really seeing the community say, these are things that you actually, that you could do, and we really support those ideas. Shuttle service, I mean, basically the improvements to make it easier for people to get around. We did ask about awareness. Are you aware or not that the city has a 10 p.m. weekday curfew for nighttime events for concerts at Levi Stadium? 44% said they are aware of it. 56% said they're not. And then we asked, do you support or oppose? This is the question from before. 50%, and from the previous slide, 50% do support the curfew, 25% oppose, 25% are neutral. The curfew is too restrictive. 34% say it's too restrictive, 50% say it's about right, and 11% say it's not restrictive enough. We did ask about some modifications. So initial, as we said, the initial support, 50% said they support the current 10 p.m. curfew, 25% were opposed, and 25% were neutral or don't know. We asked about limited exceptions. So we said maybe, what about 3 or 4 exceptions per year? 54% say okay to that. 26% are opposed. We said, first limited exceptions to the curfew, and then 3 or 4 exceptions a year, 56% support, 25% oppose. And then what about 2 or 3 exceptions per summer, during the summer months? 60% support, 24% oppose. So we have a majority support really for all of these, and then you can see there is a consistent group of constituents that are opposed no matter what, and then many are neutral or really don't know. But a majority are in favor, really like, oh, that sounds good, and also, exceptions sound good as well. The parking permits came up in some of the qualitative, so we asked about them here. So the first question was, do you support or oppose the city issuing $20 parking permits for residents in neighborhoods near the stadium, including guest parking passes to prevent stadium goers from using street parking on event days? 52% say they do support that, 24% oppose, 24% are neutral. We then gave additional information. Some people say permits would reduce event traffic in their neighborhoods and help make sure they can find parking on event days. They say it would reduce rowdy behavior, trash, and disturbances. Other people say it would cost the city and local residents too much money and resources, that it will make parking in those neighborhoods too complicated for guests and other non-event visitors to the area. So after we read that, 60% do say that they support the $20 parking permit and 20% oppose. So when we give more information, the support for the permit idea actually goes up. I'm going to now pass it off to Catherine to talk about some of our recommendations and conclusions, and then we can, of course, answer questions.
Thank you.
Later.
Thank you, Ruth and Sean. So it was our role to not only coordinate a comprehensive effort between both of the disciplines, but to really do a deep dive as a team to look at all aspects of the data and come up with a series of observations and recommendations. So first, as we've been describing throughout, there is a remarkable consistency across all the studies that were performed. I think it's fair to say that your residents recognize both the benefits and the impacts of the relationship with Levi's Stadium. And it is also fair to say that while curfew issues have received significant media coverage, stadium-related noise and the curfew are not the primary issues of concern for your residents. The top 3 issues of concern overwhelmingly have to do with traffic, parking, and loitering. And near neighbors, and it is common sense, are more greatly impacted by these specific issues. The closer one lives to the stadium, the more intense the reactions and perspectives are. It is our unanimous recommendation that these 3 top issues of concern be addressed effectively first by all parties, prior to addressing any potential curfew review or adjustments. I will now walk through and summarize the key policy recommendations in different silos, and again, emphasize 2 things. First, we are reflecting the views of your constituents. These are not recommendations that we wrote at our desks, but developed after review of the data. And secondly, these are the unanimous recommendations of all members of our team. So first, I will go to traffic and parking. As Ruth and Sean have both indicated, your residents and constituents do want more frequent shuttle service and clear designation and enforcement of drop-off and pickup for rideshare services. We are now getting into the nitty-gritty of day-to-day reality and implementation. Reduce parking prices for carpoolers and offer incentives for using public transit to and from events. While the inexpensive or free permit parking system is overwhelmingly supported by near neighbors, there is far less enthusiasm for a $20 paid permit system. While you currently do have electronic notification systems for events, they would like to see more enhancement of those, and to please avoid closure of the San Tomas Trail to enable more bike and pedestrian access. Going to the area of enforcement, your constituents clearly want more neighborhood security and enforcement against any disruptive post-event behavior. The portable toilets are huge. Increasing neighborhood safety patrols that address loitering and disturbance are significant. Expanding security and proper enforcement. Noise control. The near neighbor residents want measures to mitigate noise specifically from stadium events. Bigger fines for noise and curfew violations. Controls on the decibel levels allowed. Instituting and enforcing a permanent noise monitoring system. Other noise control measures such as sound walls, directional speakers, to mitigate the noise for near neighbors. And finally, good old-fashioned communications. Just opening those communication avenues. Happily, your constituents approve of the city's communications efforts. And again, I will emphasize, having seen a lot of these surveys, that is not always the case in other communities. But near neighbors in particular feel that the stadium itself has broken promises. And there is, quite candidly, a lack of trust which must be repaired. To rebuild this trust, the consulting team unanimously recommends that MANCO should take the steps necessary to improve transparency and effective communications with the community. A community advisory committee structure was recommended and discussed with some of the folks that were engaged through this process as an idea that your constituents had to liaison with MANCO. This type of liaison mechanism was of interest to stakeholders and near neighbors. Neighborhood improvement projects and benefits such as free or reduced tickets, cost tickets, or other overtures would assist in rebuilding and improving the relationship. And Sean can speak more directly to this, but it's almost as if people were saying, we need to feel the love. So we're going through these impacts, and we need to feel, we need some TLC, quite candidly. And setting up an effective hotline where safety and other concerns can be addressed would be a big step during the events. We will take your questions and discussion. I will advance the slide so that it will appear for everyone and the public. It is very important to us that our studies are transparently available for all members of the public to look at. And so this slide does indicate the studies that were performed that will be available on the Stadium Authority website. With that, we welcome your questions and comments.
Okay, first of all, I want to say thank you, Catherine, Ruth, and Sean, and your whole team. Your process had a lot of integrity all the way through. And it's so thorough. And I know many of us have heard a lot of these things from the community in various stages throughout the term of Levi Stadium since it was constructed and developed and through the years. But many of us felt that just hearing from a few residents here and there throughout really didn't constitute a real study that had a lot of integrity and a lot of, a baseline for us to see how we're doing. So this particular study is really what we're going to use from here on out in the future. And I think it's really a work plan for us to take forward and really start taking it and digesting it and starting to, attack issue by issue so that we can do better. We need to do better. And having this document now that I'm sure we're all going to pore over, it's a lot more than what was presented this evening, which with a lot of data. And it's going to really help us set up our strategic plan for protecting the neighborhoods out there, but still allowing the economic benefit of Levi Stadium. So thank you so much for giving us this blueprint for the future. I can't say I'm surprised at anything that you've uncovered, but it's really nice to have it now so that we have, this data that we can now act upon. Vice Mayor Watanabe?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for this really comprehensive report. What I'm excited to see is that a lot of the information that you collected is a lot of information that we had already received ourselves, but to have it now in one report so that we can now work with this. And, as the mayor just said, this is going to help us be able to create a plan to address these issues. And I mean, I've heard so many stories as I live out in the north side. I live within 1.5 miles of the stadium. And I have heard, even in the last month, some of the stories from business owners as well as residents, the impact that it's had and to their, their business and how they've set up security cameras just to protect their businesses, and what they've observed as a result of these cameras being installed is really eye-opening, and we need to do a better job of, working with our business owners and also with the residents as well. I'm really happy to see that suggestion about the portable toilets, and not that we talk about that very often either, but it really, I heard that comment from especially one apartment complex right down the street, and maybe that's where you got a lot of the comments from, or maybe those residents, but I did hear that quite a bit, and so I think that's a wonderful, wonderful suggestion. I'm really excited to have this report, and I really look forward to seeing how we can implement, more changes. There was one question I did have. I just wanted to clarify. With the parking in the neighborhoods, I just want to make sure I understand that correctly. Were residents open to cars parking in their neighborhoods, or opportunities like the $20 paid permit system to keep them out of the neighborhoods? I wasn't quite sure I understood that correctly.
Yeah. The preference would be, again, near neighbors who voice concerns would be not to have them parking in the neighborhoods, and that the parking permit program would then prohibit that from happening. And the $20 fee was talked about, but then you'll see in the recommendation, I would not recommend the $20 fee. I would suggest that be free. I think they would see that as something of an insult, perhaps, if you were to charge them the $20. But there was a lot of support for the parking permit program.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate
And I'll
that.
just make one other quick comment on the enforcement issue. And I'm pretty sure the EMC team heard this as well. They noticed the difference between your local police department and the other security forces there, and they noticed a qualitative difference in both competence of your local police department and as well as customer service. It was heads and shoulders above the, whatever we want to call it, the vendor contract
Right.
enforcement officers.
Yeah, I have heard those same comments as well, so I'm glad that, yeah, you did get that information as well. So thank you very much again for all that you have, the time that you took. And I also would get calls from residents as well saying, I'm getting these survey requests. Do you know anything about them? I'm like, I'm not a part of it, but, just follow up with it. And so I'm really glad, and I see some residents are here in the audience tonight that participated. So I really appreciate your involvement as well. So again, thank you very much.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to comment one thing, and then Councilmember O'Neill. On the parking issue, when we were campaigning for the stadium, it was presented that there would be the neighborhoods would be protected and there'd be no parking in the neighborhoods, and I think that falls under the category of broken promises. So that is something that is going to be a big issue, because a lot of the lots that we're using for parking now for Levi Stadium are going to be developed, and as the prices are high for parking and the scarcity of the parking it's going to get even worse. Concert goers or game goers to the stadium are looking more and more to park in the neighborhood, so we have to keep that promise and enforce. So those are the things that I'm making notes of as well, that are atop of the issue, and so those are top of our plan to really minimize these issues for our residents. Councilmember O'Neill?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first of all, before I kind of tag on to some of the comments the mayor made, I was just kind of curious to ask the team, the comment was made about how, particularly for the community meetings, the people who turned out were the people who had more negative feelings. And I can understand that, but, but from your professional experience, is it typical that for those kind of sessions, people who have kind of like a negative view have a lot more energy to show up? Or do people, is it on other issues, is it more balanced that maybe people pro and con will come to speak, their perspectives on an issue?
And Sean will provide additional value in a moment. You are right that much of what happened was common sense. So yes, it did not surprise me that those that came had a burning passion and a concern that was expressed. But what did surprise, I think, all of us, and again, I will say this, your director is very persuasive. So I think it's true to say that some of us on the team were concerned about the enormity of the responsibility coming in. And having done our due diligence, we didn't know what the reaction would be when we started the engagement. I think all of us presumed that there would be a very high level of interest, that the call would go out to come to a community meeting, and there would be a very large attendance, which did not transpire. So that part was very surprising and not something that I would have predicted going into this project. Sean?
On the question, Councilmember O'Neill, Board Member O'Neill, this was unusual in our experience to have, like I said, it was probably 99% of the focus group and community meeting participants really all had concerns, and so in our experiences, it's more mixed than that. But as I reflect back on it and as we look at all the results, in some ways it's not surprising, because as I mentioned, when we would ask people who supported the stadium and felt that it was a positive asset to the community, we would ask the question, but then there just wouldn't be anything else to say about it. I like that we have it. I like the visibility. I like that it brings economic benefits, and I get to go see local entertainment, and I don't have to drive somewhere else for it. But there's nothing else to say after that. So I'm not surprised in reflection that they wouldn't give out 2 hours to come and tell me something and tell us something that would take about 5 minutes or so. The people who had concerns had a lot to say. And so they literally needed the 2 hours in order to articulate all the different concerns. So it was unusual as we look at it compared to other cities, but within the context of what we were hearing here, it does kind of make sense that that's the kind of participant that came to our community meetings and focus groups.
And to tie a bow around this, one of the key takeaways, because in a way this was, I now come to feel that this should be done all the time, where there's cross-pollination of different disciplines. You should view each discrete data point or study almost as a check and balance against the other. So yes, it was this reality that for some of the engagement that PDC organized, we got the result that we did. But on the flip side of it, we also had the scientific focus groups where people were recruited that had no idea the topic to discuss. And in a way, that created a balance on the other. And so what was very interesting was that we're able to have a number of different ways to get the data, yet there's a remarkable consistency in the results for all data pieces, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So thank you. So I'm really gratified about the results of the effort, the team effort here, and I was very interested in having a robust process before we made any more decisions, and spent a fair amount of time working on kind of at least some of the initial outline that Stadium Director Santana then, worked with you on to embellish that. So I'm a lot of what I was really envisioning in terms of having a lot of data points to look at, which, and I think it's really great that we have a balance of the quantitative and the qualitative, because a lot of times, I quote one of my early managers in my career when I came forward with some really, what I thought was a brilliant idea, and she looks at me and she said, "Without data, you're just another person with an opinion." So I've quoted her I don't know how many times, because I'm like, okay, there's something to that. But there's something that there's also very, there's a lot of validity in looking at that qualitative information, because that often tells you something that numbers will never fully tell you. So we've got a lot to chew on. So some of the things that I'm looking at, because I'm thinking back to when we were in the process of looking at the stadium back when I was on the Planning Commission at the time. And, what's part of the things that I think, from a land use perspective or whatever made it, and just from a community perspective made it more acceptable, was the idea that of a heavy use of mass transit, the trail, that we had a lot of areas for parking. And so now, I look at this and just I'm also on the Capital Corridor Board, and I had a board meeting yesterday, and we were talking about things. And so I'm looking at, we do things like contact Capital Corridor, because I think that the statistics show that there's a fair number of people who come even as far as from Sacramento to go to the games. Can we really promote the mass transit opportunities that exist in that area, the ACE train and, and other things? The Creek Trail, as chair of the BPAC, I know the chief and I have both had unending discussions with the community about that. But maybe there are still some things that we can do and possibly take a different look at. How can we do things to make sure that we're protecting the security of everybody who attends an event or those who live around the stadium, and also have access from the trail. And for people who wish to bike and to walk. And I know even just recently I had a number of residents talk to me. I guess there was some confusion about the trail related to the Taylor Swift concert. And the other thing that that kind of takes, so I think if we work on that and the idea, because we were parking a lot of cars over at what we always call the Yahoo site, but that's projected to start development perhaps in the next year or two. And so we've got to be looking at that land. It's not going to be available, particularly during construction, to park cars. So we've got to be looking at lots of other things. And the other thing I kind of took away, and I know that when I thought was very telling was the information about maybe what's happening after the events, or even before. Like I've been out in talking to neighbors in the north side, like particularly when we've had National Night Out, and once again I've gone with the chief and the mayor, and you know, talking to neighbors, like when large groups of people were showing up in parks before hours ahead of time, and you know, and once again the community maybe not being as familiar with what's going on, but people that are in a park, you know, they want to have a good time at the game, but they're there for hours, and whether, once again, no, but you know, that park I don't believe has a bathroom. And you've got people that are there for hours and they're getting all sucked up for the game, but that is a little intimidating for perhaps people, older people or people with small children that are living near there. And afterwards, I think the sense of, I know a lot of people feel unease when they think that people are roaming. I mean, I see it on Nextdoor and all of there's people out there, they're roaming the streets, they're thinking, everyone's thinking they're inebriated. And so this whole thing, you know, we may need to go back and look a little bit more at, you know, the alcohol policies. And I do think having better access to, you know, toilets or whatever would be a big benefit. Because, you know, let's face it, that's just something that is a huge turnoff for people. And, you know, that's one of the major things we hear about, you know, the issues with downtown San Francisco right now, where people don't want to go there, or increasingly don't want to go. And we certainly don't want that to happen. So I think we need to really look at some of those key takeaways and develop plans, as your recommendations say, to specifically address those. And I think that we can certainly do that. And then once that community trust is established, that we are hearing their concerns and we are working with Manco to deal with that. If we see, you know, right now I think we're doing pretty well with getting weekend concerts. I mean, we've gotten some really, you know, we have Beyonce and Jay-Z coming up, and that's a weekend, and Taylor Swift was on the weekend. So, you know, but I think we have to do more of this work before we're ready to move on. But this is, I think, a lot of tremendous information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Neill. Councilmember Davis.
I wanted to thank you for this comprehensive report, because as you asked us to promise to stay away from all communications you were having out in our public so that nothing was swayed. And I promised Dr. Spano, I was like, we'll not talk to anyone.
You did a good job.
Thank you. But to have this data is key so that we can move forward in a process, because I think we were getting so much coming at us and we didn't really know how to fix the problem. But you found some really key things, even though we heard them, but you have the numbers here to support it. So that's going to help us in decision making. But the one that really got me was when you kind of showed the trust that rose to the top. We kind of thought that all along. But then when your recommendations came, you said, let's address the traffic first. And I like your ideas. I'm kind of like with the shuttle thing, because my husband is a big golf person, and every time they have Pebble Beach, they use Fort Ord, and they park everybody over there, and they shuttle everybody in, so it's less impact on the whole entire community. And then to add to that, they have rows and rows of those little toilet things. So I know we're talking about potty training here. Anyway, so that to me made common sense, because the people that live at Pebble Beach don't want to be impacted by all these cars, and they have very expensive homes, and they don't want people doing the things that are happening to our neighbors right now. So you wanted us to address that, but you gave us some good ideas here. The other one that kind of came to mind was the Creek Trail. I know that there are a lot of people who would love to ride their bikes there to avoid the traffic, because they do it just during the day, going to the tech companies. It's a way of getting away from a lot of that. And the other thing too was you kind of mentioned to rebuild the trust, that Manco should have a liaison with the community and then with the city, and then have this hotline number or something for these, because we don't have, when they complained, it was going to the stadium, it wasn't coming to us. So I think we kind of changed that around. We have this My Santa Clara app, so maybe we need to put that in effect with the stadium. And the other thing was, what about a Santa Clara Day to build up public trust? Do you think we can do a Santa Clara Day that might help them a little bit out there? And the other thing that you brought to my attention was the pickup and drop off. That was, I don't know how many of the neighbors you got over on the one side on Lafayette over there, where they have the parking issue also. They have a lot of Uber drop-offs there, and it bothers them that all of a sudden there's like this drop-off, and there's this part of the hill that they kind of walk up, which is dangerous. There's no stairs on that side. So people are going up this hill and they're falling down, and so there's a liability problem there. But some of the neighbors over there thought, well, can we have like a clear place for them to drop off and pick up? So I think in that traffic problem, that's like a big key issue that we have there. The other thing that I noticed was the post-game ruckus. So they're feeling the love for our Santa Clara Police Department, and we love our Santa Clara Police Department, but after the game, are they feeling isolated, that all of a sudden there's these drunk people, and their fear is that something's going to personally happen to them and their home and stuff of that nature. So maybe we need to really look at that one too, because when people get scared, then weird things happen. So I wish we could kind of work on that. But you delivered a lot of things that can help us probably address this. And the funny thing was the curfew. That was part of their agreement. When they signed the agreement, that the curfew that was in place in the city of Santa Clara was 10 o'clock weekdays and then 11 o'clock weekends. So if a lot of people don't understand that, that kind of concerns me that they weren't fully aware of how that was gonna come. So when you did that question, did they understand that that was a part of the agreement, or? So I was confused by that. Why would they not know about the curfew?
Well, we see that there is some awareness of the curfew, but not universal awareness of the curfew, and certainly not in our discussions with people in the focus groups, really have not. There were some that were aware of it, that have read about it or know more, but many people really don't know the details of it. And I think more importantly, it's not their primary concern.
I know you saw that was way on the bottom of the list, so it's not a non-issue with them. Okay.
Right, but they've never, for the people where it's not a concern, they've never felt that they need to go and research the details of it because it's not a concern to them.
But the traffic was like number one.
Well, the traffic in the community is their number one concern, and then they recognize that the stadium, the days there are events, it makes it worse. So they're not even mitigating the event traffic is not going to get rid of traffic as a concern, but they're already concerned about traffic, and then the events cause even more traffic, and they just see that a frustration about certain things not being dealt with, like the parking and the access, and you're not alone in having to integrate rideshare or ride-hailing into your plans. So everyone is having to now do that ride-hailing is an integrated part of our transportation system that maybe wasn't included in your hardscape development. Right.
Okay.
So it is now something that many venues are having to deal with.
So in your professional opinion, do you think that we need to be more in line with communication to those neighbors out there about what events are coming, when they're going to happen, the impact to the traffic and stuff like that? Do you feel, would they feel better if we were able to give them more information to mitigate some of the traffic?
Yes. Signage,
Signage,
clear
okay.
drop-offs.
Okay.
Information about who to call when someone has a problem.
Okay.
More porta potties.
Okay.
No people urinating or falling down drunk in their yard.
Okay.
Those types of issues.
And I would just add on to that, and then once that gets in place, let's say that you have the designated pickup drop enforcement. Yes. Enforce that, because what we also heard is there were some good plans in place, but then as events kept going on, there was a little bit of slippage, and then we didn't have Santa Clara PD there. We had some other enforcement there, and they weren't quite as good as doing it. So it was the quality of enforcement wasn't as good. And then areas where people moving signs themselves and moving detour signs. And so enforcement was a major issue that would also help along.
Okay, and I know you didn't interview people that come in from out to come to events. So how do we give those people the information?
Well, and I
mean,
was
it's-
just going to add exactly that.
Yeah.
This is not just about communication to your own community, because if as we see, we make some recommendations of things like a shuttle service or discounted rates on public transit, basically ways to encourage people to not bring their cars into the surrounding area. That's going to require communication to those that are coming to events. So that you can't just communicate to your community about these things.
Okay.
In order to make change.
Yeah, because we do hear people that come in from out of town and they don't know where to go. They don't understand the signs. They've got one way here and they get frustrated and they do crazy stuff. So I guess we have to add that to like maybe the list of Manco if they're going to do events that they can publicize to the ticket sales or however they do that. Let people know and communicate. Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Watanabe, and then Councilmember O'Neill.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add something regarding the Community Advisory Committee. I think it's a wonderful idea. And the reason I bring it up is because there was, during the recent Taylor Swift concert, there's a resident out there that likes to call me during events and let me know what the traffic situation is. And I appreciate it. I mean, I listen, that's part of my job. But what happened was that they saw the traffic flow and they took action themselves and actually reached out to Manco and said, listen, this is what I'm seeing happening. This is what I suggest. And actually, Saturday night, the second night of the concert, the changes were made, and there was definitely a different flow of traffic. So having the residents involved, because they live there, they know. And so I think it's really important, that going forward, we do engage the community because they understand their neighborhoods a lot better than we do. And so I'm really glad that that was added in as a recommendation. It's a very important recommendation.
Good. And
So
if I could just comment on that, it might be helpful for the city to initiate that as opposed to Manco
I agree.
initiating that. So the city would come in as sort of a neutral broker here saying, let's establish some good open communication between Manco and the community, and that might at least initially be a facilitated process because of the low levels of trust to get it off on a good start.
I agree, like all the stakeholders as recommended, and, there's certainly a stakeholder, we're a stakeholder, so we all need to be a part of the process,
And to
including the
reinforce
community.
what Sean is saying, we do want to emphasize again that a key takeaway of our studies is the regard in which your constituents hold the city. And so that totally makes sense because you have a well of goodwill and credibility. So to the extent that you can be more hands-on in implementing some of these recommendations, the better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember O'Neill.
Okay, kind of, once again, to piggyback a little onto that, I was looking at the appendix that has the list of the focus group and community meetings, and I had made a suggestion that the 49ers and Manco be approached as a stakeholder, and I don't see anybody here tonight from Manco. Was there an attempt? Oh, are you, ma'am? Okay, thank you. So were you able to have a meeting with them to get their input as to their perceptions?
Yes, we did reach out to numerous groups, and we did reach out to the 49ers, and they weren't able to put a focus group together, but I did have a one-on-one meeting with Jim Mercurio.
Oh, okay.
And it was very, very helpful, and actually a lot of that question around what a board member Watanabe was just talking about, we talked about as well.
Okay.
In terms of building trust and reestablishing trust with the relationship. And my perception was Jim Mercurio was very receptive to
Okay, great. I'm very pleased to hear that he was able to participate. Thank you.
I'm going to ask, I'm looking up in the sky, Councilmember Kolstad, do you have any questions? I know you're probably on mute. If you want to unmute yourself.
No, I'm here. And,
yes,
you
okay.
answered all of my questions.
Okay, Councilmember Mahan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gilmore. The only comment I wanted to make, I wanted first to express my appreciation for these hard work and dedication and good results. But also, the one comment I was particularly concerned with was on parking permits. We do have some precedents where we have made them free in other neighborhoods, and I would certainly think that free parking permits would be something that we should really consider in this neighborhood as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else? Councilmember Mahan?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I think we'll now go to the public before we make our final comments on this, unless Executive Director, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
I too want to thank the consultant team for such high quality information, and the work is now in our hands. I think the board or the council was very wise in stating that this is a work plan. There's certainly a lot of work to do, and what's interesting to me is the intersection of the other large motion that was provided on March 23rd relative to the soccer game. That is work that's still outstanding, for which we are doing some research, and we'll combine the outcome to really see what the best set of policy decisions are for the board to consider at an appropriate time. So thank you for the opportunity to to work with the consultants on this. I think we have some valid data.
Thank you. All right. Any member of the public? Do we have any speaker cards? Please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you. Tino Silva, longtime resident. I think this is great to finally have a comprehensive study because for so many years we've been going on hearsay. We've been going on, we hear this in the public, we hear this in the public, and now we can validate what we've all heard in the public. And this isn't, this study is not a witch hunt. This study is not hearsay. This study is scientific. And has plenty of merit. The question is that what are we going to start working on now? Because now that we have this, there's some low-hanging fruit. Like, can we have permits in the neighborhood? Yes. Can we police the neighborhood to eliminate public urination, to eliminate loitering and littering? Yes, we can do that. Can we put more toilets into the parking lot? Yes, we can do that. These are low-hanging fruit types of things that I think the public is going to say, you have it in front of you now, it's not rocket science, we have to make it happen, right? There's no excuse. I'm glad, I think there's a MANCO representative here today. I would have liked to have seen Jim Mercurio here today because I think he's a major stakeholder in this. And I have worked with Jim when we had to redo the soccer park. And I did enjoy working with Jim. I did think when we got down to working together, he really did a good job. So I know, and I'm hoping that he can take that effort that he put into the soccer park and put it into policing the neighborhood. The other piece is that we really need to start focusing on now, is public transportation. Because when the related project comes on board and some of these other lots are going to be developed, that parking is going to dwindle, and it's going to dwindle fast. And if we procrastinate and wait until it becomes a crisis, we're going to find ourselves behind the 8 ball. So we've got to start focusing from a long-term perspective on how do we ensure that we can get people to and from the stadium safely, efficiently. So when they do want to come to Levi Stadium, they don't say, man, I really want to go to the game, but God, I can't stand the parking. We need to figure that out now so we can eliminate that variable. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Okay, seeing none, any final comments from the council? Councilmember Kolstad or Councilmember Mahan?
No comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Mahan? Councilmember Mahan? Last call. All right. I just, again, want to thank the team here for this document and thank the city manager, executive director, the executive team, everyone, department heads for putting this all together because it really allows us to make database decisions because we have data from all different forms and all different areas. And I know it's difficult to get data nowadays, especially during the time period that you tried to obtain the data. People are untrusting. There's so many polls and everything that go on our city at any given moment. Our city, it seems like, is being asked for data constantly, and so I know how difficult it was, but I think that you really, it has a lot of integrity, and I think that's what's important for us. It's a document that we can work off of. But I think that, trust, transparency, communication, I wrote those 3 words down because I think that is the most important thing, and we have to have a good, open, and honest, trustful relationship with the community and with the 49ers and Manco. And I think we're trying to do that with our community the best we can, but we don't have it with the 49ers and Manco at this time. So this really gives us an opportunity for transparency, openness, finances, disclosures, all the things, all the promises that were made and not kept. And I think that's what, those are the things that we can work on immediately. For instance, one of the major issues, parking in neighborhoods. Well, we promised there'd be no parking in neighborhoods and it would be enforced. The big E word, we have to enforce things. Those are the things that we can work on now. Porta potties in the parking lots, consistent enforcement of the neighborhoods, consistent, and I think that's where we're lacking. So I think that the promises that were made are promises that need to be kept. The creek trail open during events. Those are the things that, we have to show our community that they can trust that we're going to do the best for them and protect our neighborhoods. What I really liked about the data that you got back was that even if you don't live around the stadium, like I don't live around the stadium, so if there's noise from a concert, it doesn't bother me or my children that need to go to school the next day. But I still have a concern, of course, as an elected official, of the neighborhoods and protecting the neighborhoods. And I think that's what I was really proud that our residents, even if you don't live near the stadium, you have empathy and feel for the people that do, because we're a community. We consider ourselves a small, large town. We're large, but still small, and we care about our neighbors and we care about our community. And I think that, we're going to do what we can to protect our neighborhoods and to follow up on the promises that were made, and to make sure that the communication, the trust, and transparency, to the best of our ability, happens with our community and with Manco. I mean, we're working really hard to make sure that it's open, honest, and trustful, and we're not there yet with them. So I really want to thank everyone, and I'm going to ask our executive director, we'll send this back for a work plan to get started, because I think the NFL games start pretty soon. I think we have another soccer game coming soon, and then preseason starts in August. So I want to make sure that we start to put some of these issues out in terms of neighborhood protections, police enforcement, all of those things before these next events, at least the things we talked about this evening, and then a work plan for all the other related issues.
So as part of the upcoming Stadium Authority meetings, we can report out the incremental changes that we'll be able to implement. Where's the low-hanging fruit that immediately has a response for the community? And those, at a certain point in time, we'll be able to provide a more thorough work plan and have that approved by the council, or the board, and regularly discussed and reviewed.
Some of them are going to be short-term, and others, like parking, are longer term, but must be addressed soon.
Absolutely.
But again, the consistent enforcement, those types of things, we can do that now. So, all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. And I don't know if you have some final thoughts that you'd like to share.
On behalf of our entire team, and there's 3 of us at this table, but each of our organizations is supported by an incredible team of professionals who all labored because we felt the responsibility of being absolutely fair and diligent in our efforts. So we thank you and the community for the opportunity to serve, and we are thrilled that you appear to find the study helpful, and we hope that can be a basis for you moving forward. As your director knows, we are only a phone call or email away. Should you have any follow-up questions, I'm certain that she would be happy to let us know, and we will endeavor to be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is that it? All right. Thank you very much. All right. Our next item is public presentations. Any items that aren't on the agenda? Are there any members of the public wanting to speak on any item not on the agenda? Okay, then we are going to adjourn to closed session.
Mayor, I just have a quick report out. I just want to remind the public, or there's anyone viewing, that we are going to experience a couple of really warm days, and that we have made available for cooling centers, the Central Park Library, Community Recreation Center, Northside Branch Library, and the Senior Center. They will be open for any person that seeks some type of more air-conditioned environment. But we are going into a heat advisory that has been published by the National Weather Service.
Is that for tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday? Like which days, do we know?
I think it's for 3 days, and we will keep you apprised as we continue to receive information. But I just want to make sure that we push out as much information as often as possible so that people know where they can cool down.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to adjourn to closed session. Is there any public comment on any of the closed session items? All right, seeing none, we'll be adjourning to closed session.
Okay.